Today, across the West, there is a realization spreading like a crack in a windscreen. The double income trap. We've reached a point where two full-time salaries can barely secure the lifestyle that one mediocre salary used to provide 40 years ago. This isn't just an inflation story. This is a story about structural failure in the Western business model. Because when the double income household stops working, the whole system built on top of it also starts to crumble. We have this idea from the movies that when a society collapses, it starts with explosions. Like riots in the street, banks shuttering their doors, dramatic speeches in government. But in reality, collapse is usually quite boring and quiet. It happens at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday at a kitchen table. Two adults looking over a banking app, realizing despite working 90 hours between them, they're actually poorer this month than they were last month. It's that creeping suspicion that you're doing everything right. You got the job, you got the degree, you coupled up, and you're still falling behind. But to understand why the collapse is happening now, we have to look at the exact moment when the math started to break. I don't want to get too bogged down in the good old days, because the past had plenty of its own problems. But economically, we have to look at the numbers because they are staggering. Go back to the 1970s. The single earner household wasn't a luxury for the rich, it was the baseline default for all of the middle class. In the US and the UK, buying a house used to cost about 3 or 4 times the average annual salary. It was a stretch, but it was doable. Fast forward to today, in the UK, house prices have risen by over 2,300% since the 1970s. Wages? They've only gone up 1,400%. If house prices had stayed in line with our paychecks, the average home would be over 100,000 cheaper right now. But that didn't happen. Housing outran wages, it outran families, and it completely detached from reality. This was the moment the second income stopped being a nice-to-have upgrade. It's not for vacations or a nicer car, it became a survival requirement. We didn't enter the workforce en masse just to find career fulfillment. We did it because the math changed. The double income household became a mandatory patch for a broken economy. But while families were scrambling to apply that patch, governments saw something else entirely. They didn't see a crisis. They saw a revenue stream. Here is the cynical part that nobody in power likes to say out loud. When households shifted from one earner to two, governments didn't say, "Great, families have more money." They effectively said, "Great, families have more capacity to pay." Without ever announcing it, the entire fiscal structure of the West rewired itself around the assumption that every house was 2 salaries now. Think about it. The tax wedge on the second earner is often brutal. Family benefits and child credits are usually means tested against your combined income. So the state treats that second salary as extra luxury money to be taxed. But for you, sitting on that kitchen table, that money isn't a luxury, it's the mortgage payment, it's the grocery bill. This is why so many voters feel gaslit right now. You hear politicians talking about supporting working families, but the state has quietly become a silent partner in your marriage, dependent on skimming off the top of that second income just to keep its own lights on. And sadly, it's not just the government squeezing you. Once they take their cut, the broken market comes for the rest. This extraction is obvious when you look at the two biggest budget killers, housing and childcare. In many major Western cities, families are spending 40 to 50% of their combined take-home pay just to keep a roof over their heads. So consider the logic. You send a second parent into the workforce to pay for the house, but the house prices rose because the market knew households had 2 incomes to spend, and now it's a snake eating its own tail. And then there's childcare. We are told to be productive, to contribute to GDP. But then you get charged essentially a second mortgage just to put your child in a safe room while you go to work. There's a dark irony in the modern double income trap. You're working harder not to join or gain wealth, but to simply afford the infrastructure that allows you to work harder. Effectively, you're paying for the privilege of having a job. But honestly, you can earn more money. But one problem is, you can't earn more time. So if we say then the money isn't even the worst part, the worst part is the time poverty. When you have two adults working 40 plus hours a week, plus commuting, plus life admin of bills and schedules, leisure time dead ends, sleep gets cut, relationships turn into logistical partnerships just to manage the kids' schedules. It feels like you're running a small, chaotic logistics company, not a family. And this got infinitely worse with remote work. Many of us thought working from home would probably be a release valve. Instead, it was a form of domestic colonization. The office moved into your kitchen. The boundary between being off and being on, it evaporated. Now Western families serve two masters in the same physical space, the employer and the cost of living. Both of them are demanding more of your time and more of what you don't have to give. And neither of them cares if you get tired. And the exhaustion? Well, it's dangerous. Because when you're too tired to enjoy the life you're working for, you start to question the deal itself. You see, Western democracy was built on a very specific, unspoken deal. If you play by the rules and you work hard, you will get a stable, dignified life. That was the contract. But when two full-time workers can't afford what one worker could buy in 1980, the contract is void, the deal is broken. This is why the political legitimacy is rotting away in real time. It's why incumbents are losing elections all over the Western world. Governments look paralysed because they are. They're trapped. They can't fix housing prices without angering the older generations who treat homes as retirement assets. They can't raise wages without upsetting corporate donors. And they can't cut taxes for families without bankrupting the treasury. And so they don't fix it. They just manage it. They manage the decline. They tell us it was temporary inflation or supply chains. But the public isn't stupid. We know the math doesn't add up anymore. So when people stop believing in the deal, the system stops being stable. And this is the dangerous part. This is where economic struggle turns into regime fragility. The Western model looks strong on paper, high GDP, high tech, strong military. But it is socially struggling right now. A society is only as strong as the buy-in of its people. When people stop believing that effort leads to reward, they stop absorbing the system's shocks. They stop cooperating. We aren't seeing massive riots yet. What we are seeing is something called the Great Opt-out. People delaying having kids. People quiet quitting. People checking out of civic life. It's a passive rebellion. But if one major Western nation hits a breaking point where the standard of living drops too fast, too hard, the contagion will spread. Not because our economies are linked, but because every population in the West is facing a very similar pressure cooker. We're all staring at the same bleak spreadsheet. So, well, what happens next? If the math is broken, do we just wait for the crash, or is there actually a way to pull the nose up? Theoretically, there is an off-ramp, but it requires a level of political courage we haven't seen in 50 years. It would mean treating housing as a shelter rather than a speculative asset. It would mean treating childcare as an essential public infrastructure, like roads or schools. It would mean radically untaxing labour. But let's be honest with each other. Governments usually don't fix things until the alternative is total disaster. So, for now, we're gonna drift. We are drifting towards a society where the double income isn't a path to wealth, but a desperate tread water mechanism. A society where families act as the shock absorbers for a broken economic model. The double income household was sold to us as liberation, and instead it became a trap. Because when a civilization requires 2 exhausted adults running at 100% capacity just to stand still, that civilization is running on fumes. The cracks are there. You can feel them every time you pay a bill. The West is struggling because the deal is off, and until a new deal is offered, it looks like the slide continues. Thanks for watching.